warm and pleasant good afternoon to one and all. Welcome to LawSikho's thorough newspaper analysis for 19th August 2023. Starting with the today's agenda of the day, the editorial section which is covered from the Indian Express, proposed IPC bill with new clause on false promise to marry. What it says and how such cases been dealt thus far, followed by the news update, which includes national news, international news, important days, awards and sports, and lastly, the legal news update of the day. Now, coming up to the editorial section, proposed IPC bill with new clause on false promise to marry, what it says and how such cases been dealt with thus far. Now, we will first consider what is the issue is involved in the today's article. So, I'm sure all of us by now are aware of the fact that the Union Home Minister Amit Shah on Friday, that was August 11, introduced 3 bills in the Lok Sabha to replace the Indian Penal Code, the Code of Criminal Procedure, and the Indian Evidence Act with Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita, and the Bharatiya Sakshya Bill, respectively. They will now be sent to a parliamentary panel for thorough review and recommendation. Now, within the proposed Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 is a clause on using deceitful means to promise to marry a woman. Such a section does not exist in the IPC of 1860. However, the issue of false promise of marriage has often come up in courts and is currently dealt with under other sections of the IPC. Now, we will understand that what does the new clause say on false promise to marry. So before we dive into our discussion, let's first have an understanding of the provisions of the bill with respect to this particular manner. Clause 69 of the proposed bill states, please read it carefully, whosoever by deceitful means or making by a promise to marry to a woman without any intention of fulfilling the same and has sexual intercourse with her, such sexual intercourse not amounting to offense of rape shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for term which may extend to 10 years and shall also be liable to fine. It is followed by an explanation saying that deceitful means will include the false promise of employment or promotion, inducement or marriage after suppressing one's identity. Now, let us consider what does false promise to marry mean and did no law exist on it earlier? Is that so? Usually, cases pertaining to this allegation are based on this broader argument that a woman's consent for sexual intercourse was taken by men with a promise to marry them later on, but that promise was not fulfilled. Therefore, that consent was made through a false promise and hence the act should constitute rape given the definition of the rape law. Now, IPC section 375 defines what constitutes rape and it further lists 7 types of consent that, if violated, would amount to rape. This includes consent taken through intoxication, through fear of death or hurt, or when a man has sexual intercourse with a woman without her consent. It defines consent as unequivocal, voluntarily agreement when the woman by words, gesture, or any form of verbal, non-verbal communication communicates willingness to participate in a specific sexual act. So where does allegation of false promise to marry fall? The answer lies in a co-joint reading of section 375 and section 90 of IPC, which is in the present state. Section 90 says, if the consent is given by a person under a fear of injury or under a misconception of fact, And if the person doing the act knows that the consent was given due to such fear or misconception, then that consent is invalid. Now, the courts have often deliberated on consent based on a misconception of fact and whether it would amount to rape under Section 375. Now, in 2003, the Honorable Supreme Court considered this question in Uday versus State of Karnataka for the first time. Okay. Now, we will take up this in the next segment. Now, coming up, now that we are clear with the law, let's see what does the court say. Now exactly we are clear with the present law. Now we are clear with what the proposed IPC bill says. Now, what is the court consideration on this particular topic? In Uday versus State of Karnataka. Now, let us understand the background of it. The court dealt with the case of a couple who engaged in sexual intercourse, following which the woman became pregnant. She alleged that the accused had promised to marry her and later lodged a complaint when the marriage did take place. Now, court said that in such a case, false promise to marry could not be construed as misconception of fact, as the man and the woman were both aware that they would face opposition to the marriage from their families. Therefore, she gave consent to act freely. She must have known the consequences of the act, particularly when she was conscious of the fact that their marriage may not take place at all on account of caste consideration. So, there are two conditions were laid down to be fulfilled for the application of Section 90 of the IPC. The first condition which was laid down was it must be shown that consent was given under a misconception of fact. And secondly, it must be proved that the person who obtained the consent should have had reason to believe that the consent was given as a result of misconception. Now, there is no straight jacket formula for determining whether consent given to sexual intercourse is voluntarily or whether it is given under a misconception of fact. In each case, the evidence before it must be considered as well as the surrounding circumstances. The burden is on the prosecution, the party that makes allegation, to prove each and every ingredient of the offense, including the absence of the consent. Now coming up to the second judicial case, which was Dilip Singh versus State of Bihar. Let us understand the background and what the court said on that particular case. The apex court acquitted a man convicted of the offences of rape by force and statutory rape. In this case, a man had sexual intercourse with his neighbor and then continued to have intercourse with her on later occasion on the promise of marriage, but did not marry her. Now, in this particular case, court held, we have no doubt that the accused did hold out the promise to marry her, and that was a predominant reason for victim girl to agree to sexual intimacy with him. There was no evidence to be sure that the accused had no intention to marry her at all from the beginning. It termed the case one of the breach of promise to marry rather than a case of false promise to marry. The court also held that there can be no denial of the fact that the appellant did commit a breach of promise to marry, for which the accused is prima facie accountable for damages under the civil law. Now the question comes up that what is the difference between false promise to marriage and a breach of promise to marriage? In 2019, the apex court ruled in Pramod Suryabhan Pawar versus State of Maharashtra that there is a distinction. It said that where the promise to marry is false and the intention of the maker at the time was not to abide by it from the beginning itself, but to deceive a woman to conceive or to engage in sexual relation, there is a misconception of fact that vitiates the woman's consent. Meanwhile, a breach of promise itself cannot be said to be a false promise, the court said. It observed that there is a distinction between a false promise given on the understanding by its maker that it will be broken, and the breach of promise which is made in good faith but subsequently not fulfilled. Now, thereafter in Sonu alias Subhash Kumar versus State of UP and another, in 2021, the top court relied on its 2019 ruling and summarized the legal position by saying that a woman's consent with respect to Section 375 must involve an active and a reasoned deliberation towards the proposed act. To establish whether the consent was vitiated by the misconception of fact, two ingredients must be fulfilled. First, the promise of marriage must be false, made in bad faith, with no intention of being fulfilled. And secondly, the false promise should be immediately relevant or bear a direct nexus to women's decision to engage in sex. On January 30, the Honorable Apex Court in Name Ahmed versus State said, every breach of promise to marry is not rape. One cannot deny a possibility that the accused might have given a promise with all seriousness to marry her and subsequently might have encountered certain circumstances which are unforeseen by him or the circumstances beyond his control which prevented him to fulfill his promise, the court said. So this was all about the proposed IPC bill, which with a new clause on false promise to marry. What was the past history of it? What was the judicial proceeding of it? And what is the present phenomena which is coming up with the new bill? I hope we have made all the events in a chronological order, which will help you to understand what is the entirety of this particular framework of this particular topic. So, coming up to the national news of the day, President launches Navy stealth frigate. India's President Draupadi Murmu launched the Indian Navy Advanced Stealth Frigate INS Vindhyagiri on August 17 at Garden Reach Shipbuilders and Engineers Limited, which is located close to the Hooghly River bank in Kolkata, West Bengal. This is the third and the last stealth frigate the warship maker was contracted to build for the Navy under Project 17A. Now, what is INS Vindhyagiri frigate? It has the name of a Karnataka mountain range. The sixth of the Project 17A frigate is a ship. It's a ship. The Project 17 class frigates, that is Shivalik class, were followed by this warship, which had platform management system, better stealth features, and a cutting-edge armaments and sensors. Now, when we understood what is INS Vindhyagiri, we need to know what is Project 17A of the Indian Navy. Indian Navy launched Project 17A Alpha frigates in 2019. The project, which is now being carried out by two businesses, Mazagon Dock Shipbuilders and Garden Reach Shipbuilders and Engineers, was started by Indian Defence Forces to build a number of stealth-guided missile frigates. Now, coming up to the next national news of the day, Priya become second Indian under-20 world champion. Priya Malik of India created history in women's wrestling by winning the 2023 Under-20 World Championship. Priya, a former world cadet champion, improved on a silver medal from the 2022 Under-20 World Championship by taking home the gold in the women's 76 kg division, becoming just the second Indian woman wrestler to do so. In the women's 76 kg final in Amman, Priya Malik defeated Laura Selene Cohen of Germany by 6-0 on points in another dominant display by the 18-year-old from Nidani village of Jind district of Haryana. A very proud moment for India. Coming up to the next national news, Pibot, the humanoid robot that can safely pilot an airplane. The Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology is making a groundbreaking advancement in aviation with the development of Pibot, a humanoid robot designed to fly aircraft using its own dexterity and advanced AI capabilities. Pibot's ability to manipulate flight instruments, understand complex manuals, and react quickly to emergency situations showcases its potential to transform aviation and other industries. Its advanced capabilities include mastery of cockpit operation and versatility and user-friendly nature. Now, coming up to the next national news of the day, Tamil Nadu government launches India's first ever night street racing circuit in Chennai. Tamil Nadu is all set to host the first ever street race at new Chennai circuit. The Tamil Nadu government and Racing Promotions Private Limited have launched a new street circuit in Chennai. The 3.5-kilometer track will be located around the island grounds and will be first ever street circuit in India and South Asia to host a night race. RRPL is also the promoter of Indian Racing League and F4 Indian Championship. The event is scheduled to be held on December 9th and 10th and will feature the F4 Indian Championship and the Indian Racing League. Now, coming up to the next national news of the day, WHO AYUSH Ministry hosts first ever global summit on traditional medicine in Gandhinagar. The World Health Organization and Ministry of AYUSH, Government of India, hosted the first ever global summit on traditional medicine at Gandhinagar, Gujarat on August 17 and 19, with a key focus area being research, evidence and learning policy, data and regulation, innovation and digital health, biodiversity, equity, and traditional knowledge. Now, coming up to the next national news of the day, government clears rupees 20,000 crore deal to build 5 warships. In a significant development aimed at enhancing the operational capabilities of the Indian Navy, the central government has granted its final approval for pivotal project to construct 5 fleet support ships. These vessels, designed to serve as vital logistical lifelines, will play a crucial role in replenishing warships with essential supplies, including fuel, food, ammunition during missions. The responsibility for constructing this crucial fleet support ships has been entrusted to Visakhapatnam-based Hindustan Shipyard Limited, a flagship enterprise under the Defense Ministry. Coming up to the next national news of the day, Jharkhand CM launches free residential coaching for particularly vulnerable tribal group students. One of the phenomenal moves, Jharkhand Chief Minister Hemant Soren inaugurated free residential coaching for particularly vulnerable tribal group candidates at Dr. Ram Dayal Munda Tribal Welfare Research Institute in Ranchi. Speaking on the occasion, Soren said that Jharkhand 8 tribes are listed in particularly vulnerable tribal group out of a total of 32 tribes in the state. The particularly vulnerable tribal groups are inching towards extinction, and it is the responsibility of the government to protect them and provide employment opportunities. Now, coming up to the international news of the day, Israel report warns of deterioration in Red Sea corals. The coral reef in the Gulf of Elias Aqaba are facing a concerning decline as revealed by 2022 report of the Israel National Monetary Program. The report contributes this deterioration to a combination of factors including rising temperatures in the Red Sea, underwater population, extreme storms, disease outbreak. The Israel Environmental Protection Ministry emphasizes the need for immediate action to mitigate the impact of this threat on the marine ecosystem. Now, World Humanitarian Day. The World Humanitarian Day is observed every year on 19th August in a bid to save and protect lives around the world. The occasion is observed to recognize the work done by humanitarians around the world by venturing into disaster-stricken regions and onto the front lines to save and protect people's life. Now, let us understand the history behind this particular day. In 2008, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution designating 19th August as World Humanitarian Day to honor the memory of those who lost their lives in Baghdad bombings. The 19th August 2003 attack on the Canal Hotel in Baghdad, Iraq, killed two humanitarian workers, including the UN Special Representative of the Secretary General for Iraq, Sergio Vieira de Mello. Now the theme of the World Humanitarian Day 2023 is no matter what. No matter what. It focuses on showcasing the importance, effectiveness, and positive impact of humanitarian work around the world. According to the UN data, 362 million people in the world are in need of humanitarian assistance by the middle of 2023. Moreover, 444 humanitarian aid workers were attacked, 116 killed, 143 wounded, and 185 kidnapped during 2022. Now, the legal update of the day. Supreme Court emphasizes importance of support persons for victim under POCSO Act issue guidelines. The Supreme Court on Friday passed an order relating to the appointment of support persons under POCSO Act and their qualification. The court issued directions for framing guidelines on their appointment. The POCSO Rule 2020 defines a support person as someone assigned by a child welfare committee to render assistance to a child during the process of investigation and trial, or any other person assisting a child pre-trial or during the person's process of trial pertaining to the offences under POCSO Act 2012. Now, it's a very important judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court. There are some key directives under this particular Supreme Court judgment. The first key directive is reporting mechanism establishment. The authorities are mandated to establish a robust and effective mechanism. SOPs. The court emphasized the creation of a meticulous standard operating procedure to guide the reporting process. The SOPs should be shared with Juvenile Justice Board and Child Welfare Committee to ensure uniformity in response. Now, the court recognized the challenging nature of victim interactions, especially in hostile environment. So, it emphasized on role of support persons. The next key directive, remuneration of support persons to be commensurate with qualification experience. While the rules stipulate payment for support persons akin to skilled workers, Supreme Court has highlighted the need for remuneration to be aligned with qualification and experience. The court explained, for example, someone who has done his MA in psychology, their salary should be like a person with a comparable qualification in PSU or government sector. Then, comprehensive victim support, a very important directive. The Supreme Court observed that justice transcends apprehending the culprit. It is equally important to ensure victims receive proper care, support, and security throughout the entire legal process. And the state responsibility for implementation, after the establishment of POCSO Rules 2020, it falls to the state to be the main stakeholder in ensuring the strict implementation of this directive. And the particular guidelines that have come up is in the case of Bachpan Bachao Andolan versus Union of India. Now, that's all for the today's news update and the legal news update. Do subscribe our channel and do like the video. Thank you so much.